So as you guys know, yesterday I was in Apple Park for the Worldwide Developer Conference, and hands down, it was my first time going and it was absolutely insane. I've already done a video on the MacBook Air M2, but in that video, a bunch of you guys asked me a few questions, one of them being whether or not you should just get the M2 MacBook Air or if you should just get the MacBook Pro 13. I think for a lot of you, the answer is just get the Air. It makes more sense, and I'll talk about that shortly, but I want to talk about the colors because a lot of you are asking me if the Midnight Black is blue. And the short answer is it depends. It depends on the light. Because the Steve Jobs Theater, which is where we filmed it, has different light sources, you have like the daylight coming in through the windows, which is typically cooler, so it tends to give a blue cast over the items inside. But then you have the tungsten lights, which are a little bit yellow, which does the opposite approach. It makes things look a bit more dark. I will say this though, it's not as dark as, let's say, a Razer Blade 15, for example, but it's also not as light as a space gray. It literally fits perfectly in the middle. If fingerprints are truly a concern to you, you're gonna wanna skip the Midnight Black and maybe stick with silver or even Starlight, but Midnight Black, hands down the best color. If you don't go with black, you're pretty whack. If you go with silver, you're playing it safe. If you go with space gray, you're okay. And if you go with Starlight, something's just not right. Now, what is right is the MacBook Air. And I know some of you said it wasn't that much of a performance upgrade, and I think you're absolutely wrong. You know, the M2 wasn't supposed to be this crazy new chip that comes onto the market and crushes the M1 Pro and M1 Max. That's going to be the M2 Pro and M2 Max when it comes out at a different date. The M2 is supposed to be a boost from the M1, and I think Apple achieved that perfectly. You're getting more performance, 25% more in certain areas, 40% in Final Cut Pro, depending on the application you're using. And the whole redesign with the MacBook Air improves the overall aesthetics and form factor of the previous generation. You get better battery life, you get a slightly bigger display, you get an extra port because it now has MagSafe, so you always have two Type-C ports open, but the skeleton in the closet is the MacBook Pro 13, and it was kind of weird because in there they had this like circular area, and on the ledge was just a bunch of MacBook Airs, and that's where everybody was surrounding around. They wanted to get pictures and videos of the MacBook Air. And then on the outskirts, you had, let's say, the Mac Studio, but you also had tons of MacBook Pro 13s, the new one with the M2, and nobody was there. I think I was like 1 out of 5 people that went over to actually film the MacBook Pro 13. But I still think it's gonna be the same sort of situation as the previous M1. It doesn't make sense to buy, because this year it's even worse because you had better speakers, you had the slightly better display, and you had the active cooling. This year, yes, you do have a bit better battery life, but it's not by much. It's only about 2 hours according to Apple's live watching video playback, which is not a real battery test, by the way. But the whole active cooling situation is not for most people because the M chips in general run very efficient, and active cooling only plays an integral role when you're pushing it over 10 minutes. And I feel like if you're literally pushing a MacBook Pro 13 or MacBook Air 10 minutes consistently all the time, that means you're using all the CPU and GPU cores to its full potential, then you probably shouldn't even be looking at a MacBook Pro 13. You should be probably looking at a 14 or 16 instead. On top of that, you're saving money. You're saving $100, which for a lot of people is a big deal. You can put that towards a beefier charger, so you can rapid charge the MacBook Air, by the way, 50% in just 30 minutes. You can't do that on the MacBook Pro 13, and the Air comes with a charger that has 2 USB Type-C ports. So not only are you connecting it via MagSafe, you still have your 2 Thunderbolt ports available, but then you get an extra port on the adapter that you can connect your phone to actually charge. The displays are different. They're both 13 inches, but 13.6 on the Air, and I'll be quite honest with you, you can't really notice that much of a difference in terms of screen real estate, and probably a lot of it is taken up by the notch, which now houses that 1080p camera. And I know a lot of you are like, Matt, 1080p with no center stage, which was a mistake I made in my previous video. I said it had center stage. It does not, but the 1080p camera is definitely a better deal. Like, I have it on the MacBook Pro 16. It looks significantly better compared to the 720p camera that's on the newer MacBook Pro 13. But there are some people and can't get over the notch, and that might be a reason for you to get the MacBook Pro 13 over the Air. Personally, I think that's kind of silly. You know, if that's really ruining your life, I think you have bigger problems. But if that's you, then the MacBook Pro 13 still exists for you. And I don't like the touch bar. I don't think it's the worst thing to be on a computer, but it's not the best thing either. I do know some developers appreciate it, And if you are a developer, then it's there for you. But I feel like in the next year or two, they're just gonna completely phase out the MacBook Pro 13. I don't think it's gonna exist anymore, right? Just because it doesn't make sense in the lineup. Like, you're buying a MacBook Air. There's no difference. There's not gonna be any difference in terms of performance. They're both using the M2 with the same amount of cores, the same amount of GPU cores, the list goes on. I did play with the keyboard, I was typing on it, and I have my MacBook Pro 16 right here. If you look at this, and then you look at the Air is literally just a smaller version of this. 2.7 pounds compared to 3 pounds on the MacBook Pro 13. It's also thinner at 11.3 millimeters compared to the thicker chassis on the MacBook Pro. It's not a massive difference when you're holding both in your hand, but if you're trying to really nitpick in terms of what you carry in your backpack and you want to keep it light as possible, then yeah, the Air makes more sense. And the kicker is, even if you go with the Pro 13, which is supposed to be a Pro model, you're not getting more ports. It's still just 2 Thunderbolt ports, Thunderbolt 3 ports, which I also made a mistake in my previous video. I said Thunderbolt 4. I apologize. I review a lot of PC laptops. Thunderbolt 4 is now stuck in my head, but it's Thunderbolt 3, which also means you can still only hook up one external monitor natively to a Type-C port, and all you're gonna get is up to 6K resolution at 60 Hertz. Honestly, if I was you, I wouldn't even look at the MacBook Pro 13 unless there's something very specific about it that you need that the Air doesn't offer, but the Air just makes a lot more sense. You know, sure, you're not getting the 2 hours extra of battery life or the slightly bigger 67-watt charger that comes in the box and the active cooling, but I think at the end of the day, I'd rather save the $100 because I know most people using the Air are not gonna be pushing this thing 24 hours a day with everything ramped up like they would on a more beefier machine. You're gonna get very similar battery life, you're gonna get the newer design, you're gonna get the slightly newer keyboard, you know, you still have Touch ID, you have the same 500 nit display, it's liquid retina, and you have the better webcam. And when you include MagSafe and the rapid charge, it's just a better package overall. Now, I'm gonna be reviewing these products. If you have anything a bit more specific that you want me to look into, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.